Classes in session.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Unlearn 16 Classes in Session. This is Stu Jeffrey. He is an amazing, witty, intelligent TikToker who has so graciously agreed to be on my podcast. This isn't a TikTok. This is our TikTok, Stu. Stu, how are you
I'm
doing this morning? Tell the listeners, the viewers,
I'm doing
something
great.
about your toque. Yeah.
My toque. If I take it off, no one recognizes me. I'm like Superman with glasses. It's
That's nice. You
legit.
should do
Yeah,
the whole Clark Kent thing.
I should. I literally got recognized one time in a Rexall in Toronto. Do you know? I was buying. It was really sad. It was. I wish like when I meet people that I was like solving some sort of like world issue, and I just turned around and was like, "This is who I am. I am better and amazing and smart and intelligent." Instead, I was buying a bag of chips, a candle. I looked like garbage, and the person was like, "Your voice. Are you Janikin?" And in that moment, I was like, "That word makes no sense here in this place."
Right.
In this sacred place of Rexall. So I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm a very nervous, like slightly off kilter person. So um they were like, I just wanted to say that you are so funny and you always know what to say, and I really appreciate your TikToks. Do you think I could string a single sentence together? Not one. I was like, thank you so much. God, it's just you are amazing. And then I just went and had to like pay for this as they were like, oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, don't be sorry. It's me.
It's all me.
Yeah, I like went back to my hole and just like put on my ring light and was like, everyone.
This is what happened. I think it's interesting
Exactly.
when people recognize you out and about, and they ask. Well, they ask. I mean, they're very, very sweet. Thank God, I've never met anybody who wants to take a swing, but they're very, very sweet, and because I'm sure there's those people out there
Oh yeah.
somewhere. Um, but what I find interesting is I get two interesting sort of outside of the you're amazing, which is lovely, and then I stumble. It's a key. You always ask what their name is and have that kind of interaction because they
That
know
would
who
be
you
great.
are, but it's really weird. You have no idea who they are.
Yeah,
But they'll say, "How do you stay so positive? Like, how do you keep your TikTok so positive? How do you?" I go, guys, I just don't make TikToks when I'm in a crappy mood. Like,
exactly.
I just choose when I'm going to make. In fact, if I'm in a bad mood or if I'm angry, I can't make a TikTok. It's not even that I don't want to. It's that the words don't come. I'm too frustrated. A lot of people are like, why haven't you said more about what's going on in Texas? I go, because every time I talk about Abbott, it's like bile built up in my throat and it sucks out the intelligence in my head. And all I want to do is swear at them. And that's not going to really go
Right.
anywhere important. DeSantis is, I can pull it together there a little bit more, but Abbott's a special breed. They ask that question and then they'll say, you're so intelligent. You always know the right thing to say. Like they said to you, I'm like, yeah, because I have 17 takes.
Exactly. I have all of this stuff. I feel like to your point though, I feel like Greg Abbott needs to be sworn at more. Um like right in his face. I
Well,
feel
I
like
think, yeah.
a good lean in. F you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because we're gonna we're gonna talk about Buffy in a second, guys. Just
I
just
can't
so
wait.
anybody who wants to talk about Buffy, please stand by. But what's interesting is Adam Bush. We were just talking about Warren from Buffy. He tweeted something the other day, and he said, "You know what? I'm learning to listen more and not run my mouth." Now I know what he meant by that,
Mhm.
but here's my worry: is this intelligent people do listen more,
Yes.
right? People that don't understand the world's not black and white. The people that understand there's complex issues, the people that want to learn and build bridges and all that, we do a hell of a lot of listening. The problem is the idiots of the world don't listen at all, and all they do is run their mouth.
Right.
So you have people tweeting and talking and swearing and acting a fool, but they're getting all of this attention. And not just on TikTok and Twitter, but in the media and everywhere, because the more of a fool you act, the more cameras are placed upon you. Um, and the rest of us who are, somewhat intelligent or somewhat articulate or somewhat whatever, we're not speaking enough. So I agree with you to some degree, is that, yeah, we got to lean in. 100% we got to lean
Mhm.
in. We got to be louder because I still would argue, there's way more. I think, intelligent, lovely, amazing people who want good things, but unfortunately are too quiet.
So that's something that it's such a poignant statement because it was something that and I'm wondering if you felt this as well when you started on TikTok, because I started on TikTok during the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, me too.
And I joined it because honestly, I live alone with a dog. She's lovely. But she got very bored of me after like the fourth day. She was like, "Are you leaving the house? Are you going to leave
Oh,
again?" Yeah,
yeah.
she's like, "Wow, you have a lot of feelings. I don't have the capacity. Um, if you could just feed me and leave, that would be great." Um, so I joined because I was like, well, this is really interesting. I'm seeing a lot of people have fun on this. Let's just look. And I was like a voyeur for the first like few weeks. And I was like,
Yeah.
I couldn't possibly make a TikTok. I'm not creative or funny, or I don't dance. I don't know how to do any of these things. But like as we've kind of like gone from like April 2020 to now, I think what was really, really, really hard for me, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, is during the election in the States, it it was really like a punch to the face to see how vehemently people believe in their horrible opinions of like
Mm,
the LGBTQIA community, of immigration, of women's rights, and how much they argue this and how loud they are on TikTok. And I've had to block so many people
mhm.
just for the sheer like darkness and cruelty they spew, thinking that they're allies and thinking this is a political ideology rather than something that, if taken all the way through to what they're saying, would be a cruelty inflicted on another person. And
Mhm.
that's something that was so hard for me to recognize, is that I was like, I can't believe that we're not as far as I thought we were, that
Yeah.
there's people who believe this and are arguing this, and they don't even see the other side of it. And I would say there is people to the other side as well. And
Mhm.
I think that there's like, it's like argument with no context, and it's just very, very sad. So I'd love to hear your opinion, because I see these like every once in a while a video like makes it through all the blocks and like arrives on my For You page, and I'm like, what? And then I go down a rabbit hole because then I start reading the comment section, and that's just never a good idea.
Never a good idea. First of all, I joined at the same time you joined. I separated from my wife separated from me in like December, and then we went to lockdown. So my life was a particular brand of like, what just happened to
Right.
everything I knew. And so I was sitting here alone for 3 months because we were obviously in. That's how it worked in Ontario, and my students said, "Joe, get on TikTok, get on TikTok." I'm like, guys, everything you show me on TikTok is terrifying. Your For You pages or whatever. What do you think I'm going to bring to that tableau? And then my friend's kid, who was in grade 7 at the time, or just getting out of grade 6, says, "Joe, you should go on TikTok. You'd be so funny." He goes, "Let me set it up for you." So this grade 6 kid set up my TikTok. His name's Charlie, and he taught me how to. And I started quite literally not even talking, which is interesting because I didn't even know that was a. I don't know. I knew you could do it, but it's not what I was seeing, right?
Right.
So what did I start doing? Well, I started lip syncing. My friends would call me and be like, "Are you okay? Like, we know you're getting divorced, but where should we be sending help? Should we just break? Joe, you're not, you know." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And at that point, at that point when I joined, I was feeling better because I joined like in when do we go? When did we lock down?
I would
March?
yeah, March, around March, the second week of March.
Okay, like I joined relatively like after lockdown, but by lockdown, I wasn't as traumatized as I was in like let's say February. February
Right.
was about. So I joined and I started lip sync, but like I don't know, Stu, if you've seen my old stuff, but you want to laugh. I mean, take a minute. There were
I
full goddamn videos of getting out of the car, of New Kids on the Block, Justin Timberlake, and when I met Anna, the production just went up.
Yeah.
She said, "Well, we got to go to different places." You know what I mean? You're not just singing
Hmm.
cute little winking against your wall. No, no, no. We gotta go out. And so and there was take after take. There was
No,
outfits that
actually,
were bought. Oh yeah, I was all
Yeah.
in.
The best part is like I got the same phone calls from people from people when I bought my first wig. I was like, well, I'm gonna need a wig to do all of these female lip
Absolutely.
syncs. So I did it, and then I got like calls from friends being like, "Hey, um, I saw your TikTok. That's wow. Do you have a wig now?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Hmm, are you do you we could talk more if you want." I'm like, "I'm having a good time." They're like, we see that. Maybe cool it.
That's totally what happened.
Yeah.
And I think so anyway, it took me a while to get it was funny because I was on it for I don't know, 6 to 8 months of just doing that. And it took me, I think at some point I talked about politics or I talked about something to do with Ford. I don't even remember what my first one was.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden I was in my element, you know. Lip
right,
syncing was something to make me laugh. People were so lovely. They just compliment you, which is hilarious. I just think it's beautiful. And I found such a pretty little demographic.
right,
And then I kind of talked about politics because I was probably pissed off one day. And then all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh, this is I can teach on here.
right.
Oh, I don't have to sing Cher songs." I mean,
Exactly.
I love you, Cher, if you hear this ever. I mean, please
Yeah.
come on my podcast. But I realized that, and then I haven't found a lot of hate, but I understand what you're saying in this. It's not that I don't find hate. I find a lot of shots sort of at my aesthetic. What I find,
Mm,
and this is what I think it is. So I think the rise in perceived hate or animosity or whatever is twofold. Number one, it was always there. We
right.
just developed a society under which, let's say under the Obama administration, that
Hmm.
people shut up. People
Right.
knew that it wasn't acceptable for it to come out of your mouth, but those people were still there.
Hmm.
And then Trump comes into power, and as much as everybody thinks Trump created bigots, no, he didn't. But what he did do is, validate what they have to say, and encourage them.
Hmm.
And I think this is a tale as old as time. No need to reference Beauty and the Beast, but I think when you want to gain power, you find people that are upset
Yeah.
and you find out who you can blame. That's a minority because you can't blame the majority.
No.
So you find out the small fraction of the minority that you can point to and say, it's them. They
Yeah.
did it. And Trump did it beautifully. Who does Trump point to? Well, first he points to the Mexicans, right?
Hmm.
Illegal immigration. And he points to them and he makes this big deal about a wall. And he made this big deal about a wall, not because the wall was going to do a goddamn thing, but because the wall got to be symbolic of us versus them. And your life, even though your life in Michigan, because your plant closed in 1997, has nothing at all to do with immigration. You want to talk about something, we can talk about NAFTA, but it has nothing to do with that. But you're poor, your communities are destitute, you have drug problems, you have crime problems, and you don't want to necessarily shoulder that yourself or whatever individual responsibility for all the Republicans out
Hmm.
there. But you also don't the government doesn't want you to blame them cuz shit. So guess what? I'm going to point for you and then you can direct your anger towards them and by virtue of that give me all of your power
Right.
and give me all of your support. And unfortunately, that's not new. That's always been the case. I think I'm going to come to the gay, lesbian and trans issue because I think it's slightly different right now, but I
Yeah.
think that it's a good reason. You're going to like my perception for a second. I think I think it's the death thrall. I think it's a dying perspective and ideology that's on the verge of dying. And they know they're on the verge of dying because kids in Florida are walking out of their schools and kids in Texas are pounding on the desks when Abbott's representatives try to talk about this, right?
Hmm.
Their ideology is dying. We're speaking to adults here. We're not speaking to kids. We're not
Right.
speaking to young teens or kids in their 20s. That garbage is dying. So what are they trying to do? They can see it dying. They see the wave of change. They see the sort of the cresting of this massive, massive push, and they're terrified. So what are they doing? Well, they still control the legislature in a lot of states, And
Yep.
so they're going to pass the most offensive, controlling, manipulative pieces of legislation to try to stop the wave.
Hmm.
And so, are we going to get hurt in the process? Yeah, but it's going to crash the wall.
Oh, no, I completely agree with that. I think it will eventually crash the wall. I think right now, it's a very, very interesting place to be in. Um, because you're watching, especially when you're on a platform where you have a larger platform, you have a lot of followers, because when you speak about these issues, you get to see this wide spectrum of people's opinions, and it's very, very interesting to see what people were saying a couple of months ago versus what people are saying now. And I do think that you're correct. It is a death thrall, but it's that that grip they have to it because they're so worried about letting it go that
Mhm.
they've become a lot more um, vocal and kind of like dredging up these old stereotypes to argue these points and to validate this legislative cruelty. To it's interesting. It's interesting to see this. I think that in the process of this kind of political posturing, it's going to hurt a lot more people in the short term than it
Mhm.
will in the long term. And I think that um, especially speaking as an elder millennial, I know I look a mere bebe, but I am elder millennial.
I've got you by at least 10. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, exactly. Like exactly, I'm 10. It's my skincare treatment. Um, but it's really it's we I think elder millennials carry a lot of these scars and wounds from how we grew up having to just apologize all the time
Mhm.
for other people's reactions to us being gay. I think we kind of carry that forward into our lives, into our adulthood, where I don't want that for kids now. I
Yeah.
see Gen Z on TikTok and I think I'm in awe of them, but I think at sometimes Gen Z tends to um, leave context out of the conversation they're having or nuance, and they just sort of are like, if you feel this way, you're wrong. And it's like they're the most empathetic generation with, I would say, very little empathy to
Yeah.
people before them and after them. And I
Yeah.
think for millennials, which you're a millennial, right? You're still an like millennial with lung as
I
me.
was born in 75, love. I think
Stop, you were not.
I was Stu, I told you I had
You
you by at least 10, if not more. Yeah. 1975, me and Jaws.
oh, I thought you and I were the same age.
I
Around the same
told
age.
you.
Well, you know what? What is your skincare routine? Tell me now.
Now it sounds like a TikTok live. I use charcoal soap from Beauty Counter on
Okay.
my face, and I use a cream from Beauty Counter, whatever their basic
Yeah.
cream, and that's it.
Okay. I
I
use
don't, you know
prayer.
what? I've never smoked. I don't do the makeup thing, obviously. I've never done drugs. I don't drink. I think all of those things kind of
Right.
like help. I've been
Yeah.
really boring, so I have boring skin.
Well, it's working. So like whatever, just like step on your podium. Here my like old bag of a face. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, but it's something that like I think it's sad. It's sad right now to kind of like see this change in the conversation, especially with some of those old tropes like grooming are coming up a lot more,
Oh,
which
that word. I'm
that
gonna
word,
like
yeah. If you want to like
It's a well played word. Let me just put
yes,
like somebody was sitting around the Republican House and goes, "I know what word we're going to use. We're going to
right,
use this." And when
right.
and when they associate the word groomer with sexual assault and predatory behavior, we're going to
Hmm.
say, "No, no, 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 no. That's your mind associating those
Hmm.
words. We're simply talking about
Right.
grooming kids in order to control the narrative. That's just you coming up with that. Yeah, that was a smart. Whoever
It
sat
was
around
smart.
thought, that's a word. That's what we're
Well,
going to do.
it's sexualizing an entire minority of people and rooting everything they're saying in sex and ignoring the larger implications of these legislations. What I was saying about millennials earlier, though, before I got distracted by your beautiful radiant skin, was is that I think it's interesting to see how millennials are hated on both sides. Like
Yeah.
uh, Gen X and Gen Z are kind
Hmm.
of like one thinks we're lazy and entitled and overly emotional, and the other thinks that we are. overly emotional and are the worst generation known to generations. But I think like millennials have this weird ability to be able to like give Gen Z the context over why we feel
Yeah.
maybe um not as safe to speak as openly or
Yeah.
as vibrantly as they do. And then with Gen X, I think it's um we have a certain level of respect for the generation that passed us who did a lot of that work.
Yeah, sure.
We'll also like looking our nose down at them, being like, ugh, Gen X.
I
So like
think I think it's hard too because empathy's hard.
it is very
Uh,
hard.
Genuine empathy, I think, is a bit of a unicorn. I think a lot of people say they have it. I think it's incredibly hard to truly feel it. I mean, most people can't define between empathy and sympathy, but I think
Right.
it's very hard. You know, you have all these people wandering around saying, "I'm an empath." I'm like, listen, honey,
Oh God.
you're not an empath. You know,
No.
Deanna Troy was an empath. You're
Exactly.
not.
You're
Yeah.
not you.
But empathy's hard. So I'll give you an example. Like I came out when I was 25.
Hmm.
I was older, but I mean when I was in high school, gay was the punchline of every joke. Every
Right.
single joke. You want to watch terrifying movies that talk about homosexuality, you watch movies from the 80s and early 90s and how much they use the F word and how much they, how much being gay is the punchline, especially for men. And um I was absolutely gay in high school. I think it was all super subconscious about. I also grew up in a suburb where it just wasn't an option. You know what I mean? It
Right.
just wasn't an option. We had one gay kid at our high school, and people, well, every day he was teased and bullied
Hmm.
and whatever. And I would love to find where he is now, actually. And then I came out at 25. And then I came out when I was at university, which is kind of a safe space to do so because let's
Yeah.
be honest, it's like everybody's using the term partner at York University. I'm looking around going, is everybody gay here? Is that,
I thought too. I went
because
to
I'm looking around,
Clinton.
yeah, you're using partners? Is everybody gay?
We're partner.
Um, and then I met somebody who was like the gayest of gay, right? And you're kind of drawn to that person because they seem to have so much confidence. Really, it's just damage. But whatever, we can talk about that on another time. But when I came out, I didn't. I had a rough time with my family for a little while, but I didn't have much of a hard time. I was still scared of being out when I started teaching and stuff initially. But what I've tried to do, and I say this to people all the time, I'm like, guys, it's not that I've never been called a name.
Hmm.
But I've never, or shouted out or whatever, but I've been very lucky into where I've got to stand. So for me, when I tried to empathize, not even that far outside of my community, I think gay women, somebody who looks like me maybe face a little bit more, but usually that's from guys who are wanting to be gay and are puffing up their chest around me.
Right.
Um, but I don't face that kind of violence. Meanwhile, the more gay men that I've gotten to know and that I've spoken to and I've listened, I'm like, shoot, there's the violence, right? Like there's the violence. And that's why I think even within our community, there's such an insane divide. You know this.
It's crazy.
Such an insane divide about what I've been through, my experience, blah, 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 blah. Why doesn't it apply to everybody else? And it astounds me because the legitimate danger, physical, not even simply emotional, even though emotional scars last a lifetime,
Hmm.
that other people in our community face. And I haven't faced it. It hasn't confronted me. That's the hardest thing. And I'm in the community, Stu,
Right.
right? So how are we going to expect a Midwestern white Christian woman living in what, Wyoming, to understand the plight of what it is to be a brand new immigrant in Texas,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
How do we bridge that?
Well, I think bridging that is listening, act truly listening, which is so very hard, because the amount of time that we spend taking in information and in that moment stopping ourselves from fully immersing ourselves in what they're saying, and what
Yeah.
we do instead is take offense to it. So very similar to what you're saying about our
Yeah.
community is that we hear someone tell their story and we're like, okay, so you went through all this pain. They're telling this horrible story about how they came out. It was really traumatic. They faced physical violence. And the entire time we're thinking, I didn't experience that. Or we're saying,
Mhm.
I experienced that. What are you complaining about?
Yeah.
Like,
I
what are
got through
you?
it.
Yeah, I got
What's wrong?
through it. Like, that's the, and this is, oh my, I'm going to say something so not great. I think it's that
So
whole,
excited right now.
I know. It's the one campaign that I absolutely couldn't stand, and I know it came from a good place. The It Gets Better campaign, although
Mm,
it wasn't it for me, because
mhm.
if you tore away all of the fanfare, all the celebrity, everything else, at the root of that campaign, it said you will suffer, and then you will get through it, but you will get through it because you either A, leave, you find a new family and a chosen family, or you it's your reward. Your life without pain and suffering and struggle is your reward for being gay when you figure it out yourself. But there was no plan there. It was just like a generalized, don't do anything to hurt yourself, live
Yeah.
through that pain, and then you'll figure it out. But there's a lot of people who can't afford to leave that situation, who end up living in that situation and just realizing later on that all of these celebrities, all of these media executives, all of these people who managed to get out of their bad situations, saying it will get better, it will for some people not.
Mhm.
And that is a burden that campaign placed on the person, the
Sure.
individual,
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than it placed on the people in power to change that legislation, to change um, that violence and cruelty around them, to
Yeah.
change the conversation and make it better for these people who should just be able to go to school, should
Yeah.
just be able to live openly, happily, and with full autonomy of their own body
Mhm.
and their own personhood. And I think that was sort of like where we are right now. It's just this weird sort of like, at least for a lot of us, this is the conversation we have within our community of like, it got better for me, so you can get over it.
Mhm.
And it's weird. It's a very weird thing because we stop listening.
I think we also under what's so funny because we also undervalue. Okay, so let's say you grow up. I use Wyoming only because of
Hmm.
uh, the Laramie Project. Like I
Right.
use those places because of their particular history, but they're
Right.
fairly isolated. And it's not to say this doesn't happen in Canada. It just happens in places I've never lived.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, what happened in Whitby, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
just outside of Toronto is where I grew up. But I think what we forget is it will get better. Okay, fine. So your home that could be violent, okay, because you're gay, because you're trans. Eventually, you can move. The damage that is done within 18 years can be so catastrophic and so identity forming
Hmm.
to the point of serious health issues for the rest of your life. You're going to say, well, at least you're not living with your dad who beat the hell out of you because you were trans. Okay. But
Right.
now I get to live with the socialized belief that I deserve that for 18 years. And I
Exactly.
develop things like borderline personality disorder. The more that I learn about things like that, the more I recognize that you know, you, and I don't mean this even in a facetious way. You'd rather get smacked
Right.
because being hit, there you the bruise heals, right?
Hmm.
And you know that but this incessant and subversive manipulation of who you are and what's okay and whose fault is it and how gross and dirty and broken you are. That should that just doesn't leave ever.
No.
You know, I've talked to
Right.
therapists that said if you have BPD, you don't get it, you don't get rid of it. You're
No.
just gonna have it. You're gonna walk into a room and the room's gonna be painted blue, and you could swear on a polygraph that it's red and pass because
Hmm.
of how much damage. And
Yeah.
people don't talk about that. There it is,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And it's
So
it's
I think
something. Sorry, go on.
No, no, go ahead.
I was going to say it kind of ties back to the media, the conversation that we will eventually get to about Buffy, where it's
Mm,
like you see these characters in media, these LGBTQIA characters in the media, who are largely defined by pain and struggle that their heterosexual counterparts don't
mhm,
experience at all. That we I don't know that we I think it's a very interesting conversation to have about like we celebrated this show so much. I was the first time I ever saw like a representation of a gay character who was in a happy relationship.
mhm.
And it wasn't like a gay male relationship. It was a lesbian relationship. And I was like overjoyed. I was like, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because on the other side of that, for me, my arc countertype at that time was Jack McPhee from Dawson's Creek. And he was struggle busing the entire way through.
I feel like he still struggled at the end of that season
Same.
6 arc.
Yeah. It was like
It
he
was pain
never,
after pain after pain.
exactly, it never ended. And it
Yeah.
was like, it was so nice to see. But again, like Joss Whedon was like, I want the rest of the characters to value life, so I'm a killer. And you're like, cool, okay, awesome. And now Willow is so hurt, so broken that she decides to end the world. What?
Listen, I've known a lot of lesbians, Stu. That might have been a little on the nose. I'm just I'm just saying. I'm just saying, if perchance
Right,
I had that power circa, 2020 December,
right.
I'm saying, Stu, I may have had a few veins. That's all I'm saying.
Just yeah, it makes sense. Black
I'm
eyed girl.
admitting it. I'm putting it on the table.
I mean, like, and I think
It might
like
have been on
but I think that's really funny. Because I think same.
the
I mean, like, I think it's maybe same. Um, I think what's interesting is I think that I believe that for me at least, my first entrance into kind of like what gay was outside of the feelings I was feeling internally,
Mhm,
my first kind of entrance into what gay was the death of Matthew Shepard. So
mhm.
that was something that because I was what? I was in grade 6 or 7 when that happened,
Yeah.
99, 98. Um,
So
so
you
it
were
was
aware of it in night? Were you out in 99, 98? No.
no, 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 no. I,
So
I, I'll tell you a really sad story, and then we can kind of launch off of that. But basically, like, I didn't know what was. I knew there was something different about me. In
right.
like by 6 years old, I was like, there's something not computing. Like,
Well,
I'm not
6
like
years
the
old.
rest of the boys. Yeah,
Okay.
like 6 or 7, I was like, I am not like the other boys, and maybe I'm just, and people call it dramatic or emotional, or like he's a
Sure.
very, like, he feels a lot of feelings.
And theatrical. They should have
Yeah,
entered you into the
theatrical.
musical theater business. Yes.
Exactly. So then it kind of went in, and it was interesting because I didn't actually assign any like name to myself. It was the kids in my class who started
Mm,
saying like queer and the F slur and all of these things at me. And it was me being like, what does that mean? So I
yeah.
went to the library and like I am so
What did
happy
you
that
do?
nowadays there is a wide variety of information to kind of and stories from queer voices
Mhm,
to kind of like lessen um because when I went to the library, it was basically a very small section, and if I was to go off of what that information gave me and the access I had to it, it would say that I would contract an
HIV?
STI,
Yeah.
AIDS, HIV, and I would be addicted to drugs and I would die alone and miserable. Um, and it was a very hard thing. So, like at 12 years old, I remember reading all of this, and I was a very shy, very introverted kid. So, like, I knew that I couldn't tell anyone. I knew that it was so terrible and so horrible because of all of the reactions from the people in my class who were also children, but I gave so much power to
Yeah.
that I was like, well, I guess I can't beat this, but I could beat cancer. So like I would pray to a God I don't believe in to be like, um, can you we'll just switch. You give me cancer, I will fight that because I can fight that and people will support me on that, but I can't fight gay. There's nothing in these books that tells me that I can win over this.
Oh, Jesus.
But it's interesting because like when I finally came out, it was
How
actually
old are you?
I came out at 20.
20.
Um,
Okay.
and it was something that was so I think you probably felt this feeling as well. I think every queer kid does at some point, is that all of this media, all of this these stories are told and we watch them and we're like, I feel somewhat broken inside. Like I don't feel like something's connecting. So
Yep.
all of my yeah. So then you have your first. So I went on a date with a guy. He's wonderful. He was wonderful, and it was like I was so scared to do it, and I was
Mhm.
like, and he kissed me for the first time, and it was like everything in my brain connected, and I just had that moment, and it was a weird thing because you don't usually assign this much power to a kiss, but it
Mhm.
was like, oh, this is what I wanted. This. I'm not broken. I
Mhm.
just wanted to feel connected to this person.
That's it.
And it's like this really weird shift in your brain, and you are still scared of being rejected by your family and friends, but you realize that there's other people that are
Mhm.
experiencing that as well. And at least you have that. And I think that's so powerful about the community that we've built or that have been
Mhm.
built for us and we kind of add to is that we're so protective now that people in my generation, people from your generation have written stories, these beautiful fiction, these TV shows, these characters to show people in Wyoming, in like rural Massachusetts to and rural Texas that like being gay is not terrible. You don't need to
Yeah.
pray for cancer. You can there are success stories here.
That's insane. And that's how I describe it. It's so funny because I dated guys until I was 24 or whatever.
Right.
And I dated great guys. I love
Mhm.
people like, you haven't dated the right guy. I'm like, listen, I dated some good guys, some really,
Right.
really lovely, lovely boys, and then, men ish.
Yeah.
And I said, I go, but I always felt that there's an emptiness. Not
Right.
that they weren't amazing. Not that even I wasn't even attracted. It was like a vapidity that you would feel almost in your stomach. And you'd be like, I'm just broken.
Yeah.
I'm broken. And I
Mhm.
and I and I resigned myself to thinking that's just that's just who I am. I
Yes.
don't feel things deeply.
Oh,
That's just
yes. That's a
right?
perfect way of saying it. You don't feel it deeply.
I
It
don't feel it
doesn't.
deeply.
Yeah.
All those girls crying at their lockers in high school, I didn't understand them. I'm like,
No.
"What's the matter with you? Move
Exactly.
on. Go to class." And then I kissed my first girlfriend and it all went to shit.
Yeah, and then
I
you're like,
mean,
"Oh, I get it."
oh, I just went back to the locker in high school. I'm just gonna have a
Exactly.
cry here because I
Right.
feel like I should have the moment I should have been afforded in grade 12.
Right.
Um, but yeah,
Exactly.
and then you're like a kid again. And then at
Yeah.
24, I felt like I was 16.
Right. And you're feeling all of your like 31 flavors of feelings all at
Mhm.
once, all at the same time.
Absolutely.
It's the most your first relationship, my first relationship was the most dramatic, most
Oh,
overwrought
sure. Of course.
relationship ever. I felt everything. I was a crazy person. I look back on
Mhm.
myself and I'm like, who was that? Because I'm a
Mhm.
very like medium tempered, like middle ground, calm person. Not then, psychotic. Like why
That's
have
how it
you
goes.
texted me back? It's been 38 seconds.
No, but that's how it goes,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because, you know, again, if we go back to how do we get at the midwife, the
Right.
Midwestern straight white woman or the guy that works on his truck. These aren't bad people.
No,
I
not at
don't
all.
believe they're horrible people. I just think they have zero access. But how in the hell do we explain that feeling? Because I think if they understood that feeling,
Mhm.
they would understand why in grade 1 we should be allowed to say gay. They would
Exactly. Yes.
understand, they would get it. They'd go, "Oh." Because not only it's not about sex, it's not about
No.
partners, it's about feeling disconnected, and that feeling of disconnection is while it winds itself up, is terrifying and can lead to some pretty horrible things. For me, I just thought, oh well, I'll just date a new person every month, month and a half. I get bored, I feel
Exactly.
disconnected, I move on. That's it.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to be.
that's it. Or it's like for me, what I ended up doing was retreating so far into myself that I was like, books are my only friends. I
Mhm.
don't want to, and I became a very, now that I look back on it, I became a very sad and lonely person because I had accepted early on that like there was something just wrong with me and that
Right,
I didn't feel things the same way other people did. I didn't want the same things. And maybe I was just destined to be alone. And that was okay, as long as I could fill it with all of these other characters that I
right,
love. And it was,
right.
but I think the thing that, the most important thing you just said is like, how do we get at that person? I
Yeah,
think we get at them through media, through like TV, through movies, but I think
I
we
agree.
have to stop telling stories of like, I think you tell the stories about coming out, but like, have you seen Heartstopper? Have you watched it
No, I
yet?
don't. No.
Okay, it's
What's
on
that?
Netflix, and I think it's. I'm
Okay,
not going to ruin it for you because it's a beautiful story, but
I'm
it's
gonna write it
written
down. You gonna
by.
ruin it for me? Sorry.
I'm not going to ruin it for you because it's absolutely
Oh,
lovely.
okay.
I like
I'm
cry
gonna
over
ruin
it
it
every
for
day.
you.
It
Buckle
was
in.
released last Friday. I watched it a total of 6 times. It's 8 episodes anyway, but it tells a story about two boys who just fall in love or like
Mhm.
fall into like heavy like, and it doesn't tell it tells a coming out story, but what it does and it focuses on is that it kind of takes all of those tropes that we are used to seeing in media, like the scorned woman who becomes a shrew because her boyfriend ends up being gay, the best friend who outs the gay character, the coming out process, which is terrible on one side, and the other, the whole thing. All of these tropes that we wait for, that we're like, oh, okay, it's coming. They're just
Mhm.
throw it in the garbage, and it's written
Yeah.
by an LGBTQIA author. Um, and basically like she said, I wanted to create a story that just was, I this boy liked his friend more than a friend, and they
Mhm.
both fell
And
into
that's
like
it.
heavy lake. But that feeling, that click is seen on screen. And I think that the more that we have these stories that don't base the gay characters or the LGBTQIA characters into struggle, because larger audiences will understand that struggle. But what they will understand is the same tropes that we deliver them, the same spectrum of vibrancy we deliver to heterosexual characters.
Yeah.
They know that if a female and a male character are they hate each other at the beginning of the story and they give each other a look midway through, we all know we're coded
We
to
all know
believe.
what's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, we're, oh my god, they're gonna be in a relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're waiting for it. So it's
Yeah.
like having those stories told in a healthy, positive way where it's like you don't have to focus and build the story around that person being gay. You
Mhm.
just have to tell a story. Take Meg Ryan out of Sleepless in Seattle, put a guy in there. It's the same
Mhm.
story. Nothing
Yeah.
changes about it. Take You've Got Mail. Apparently, I'm on Meg Ryan roll. Take out You've Got Mail. Take out Tom Hanks. Put a woman in. It's the same
Yeah.
story. It doesn't have to change it.
I'll
And
do
I
it.
think,
I'll
yeah,
do it.
I volunteer as tribute. Yeah.
I think also going back to your original, it's interesting because you receded. You knew something was different. You knew something was whatever. You know what's interesting? And that nobody, again, we don't talk about this a lot within the community, I don't feel like, or outside of the community. But what's interesting is who I was allowed to be as a youth, who I was allowed to be in high school,
Hmm.
and what I was allowed to experiment with, which is probably why it took I was fine, kind of, right?
Hmm.
Because I mean, if you're listening to me right now, I'm wearing a football jersey and a hat. I was allowed to be that person because girls were allowed to be more masculine. I was allowed to play baseball. I was allowed, for the most part, there's
Yeah.
limitations, right? As soon as I cut my hair, it all went to shit. But like, I was allowed that diversity, and so nobody questioned it. So when you receded yourself into books, it was because people questioned your emotionality. People
Yep.
questioned your more, let's say, and I hate to use the dichotomous, but feminine
Right.
sort of persona, and
Yeah.
and that wasn't okay. It wasn't okay. Everybody started I wasn't called gay because I played baseball, because girls were allowed
Hmm.
that diversity, right? And we've been allowed that for quite some time. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I look around my classroom. I say this to my kids all the time. How many girls are wearing skirts? Oh, no, not a one. Okay, we're all wearing pants. All right. How many guys are wearing skirts? dudes, why haven't you switched over? I'll tell you
Yeah.
why you haven't switched over. Because when women become more masculine, we're moving up the chain.
Hmm.
And when guys become more feminine, they're moving down. They're becoming less.
Yes.
And all of that implied sexism and all of that means that young men, which is why young men, horribly enough, are so much more prone to take their own life or
Hmm.
to self, like, to some
Yep.
degree, because of this, because they're not allowed to go down that Barbie aisle. You've seen the TikTok where the kid picks the Barbie and it has like 18 million views because it's so unique.
Yeah.
I was allowed to go in the GI Joe. Nobody gave a crap. I bought Lego. Nobody cared.
Hmm.
Nobody cared. So I
Exactly.
feel like that's why I kind of made it through, I think, a little less, feeling a little less weight, even though I was missing something. I was missing
Hmm.
that connection. I still got to do a lot. But it was funny. It meant that I was very disconnected from you were very connected to your emotionality. I was very disconnected. So when I came
Hmm.
out, and some of my closest friends, after hanging out with me a little bit after, they're like, Joanna, it's like a whole new person. I'm like, what? She's like, you never talked about your emotion. It was like we only got a piece of you. We got happy, we got the athlete, you were smart, you were sarcastic, but that was it,
Hmm.
And I didn't understand that but I feel again like women are given a bit more space.
I think that's a really what you just said about the um, men are like devaluing themselves by wearing skirts in a society.
Oh yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
think that's such a powerful statement because it's something that is it's so rigid, especially when I was going through high school and the same as you. And now I think it's still it's a horrible um, sort of like rigid framework we live within, but there are men and kind of teenage
100%.
boys pushing against it, and I really really value that. But even myself sometimes, like I don't know if you get this, but it's like when you wear certain things in certain places, like if I were in rural Wyoming, I don't necessarily know if I would be dressing as comfortably as I dress here in Toronto in a
Right.
place that I'm comfortable with. I think I, for lack of a better term, code switch versus where I am. Like I will drop my voice an octave. Um, and like
Uh,
I will speak a little bit slower. I'll like really focus on my hands being like either in my pockets or like in front of me to make sure like I don't come across as too, it was funny to come across as too gay. When I got a job, I was a writer when I first left university. And I met this guy and he had everything all together. Insurance. He worked in insurance. It was the most boring topic to talk about with him, and he wanted to talk about it endlessly. He was like today at the office, and I would just be pouring myself a large glass of wine, being like, "Tell me more about it." If I fall asleep, I'm still interested.
yeah.
Yeah, but I
You're
was
so
getting a
lovely
job.
to listen to. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly, like lull me to sleep. Insomnia was not a problem I dealt with in that relationship, um, but um, it was interesting. So I was getting a job, like he had his whole life together. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I also need a corporate job. So I went and got one at this manufacturing firm to fill a maternity leave position. And before I left, and I'm 24 when this happened, he turns to me, another 24-year-old, and goes, hey, just make sure that you're not too gay, or they like in the interview, protect yourself and just tone it down. And I was like, am I super gay? And he was like, no, you're not, but you're super gay to anyone who's straight. So
Hmm.
just tone it down. So I went there and like something that was so uncomfortable to me. Um, and I barely made a joke. I barely talked normally. And with everything was a very like rigid, structured conversation with no affectation or anything. And I got the job, but it took me years to stop like to everywhere I went to kind of like change that. Do you do that too out of curiosity? Do you like change yourself a little bit?
I don't, and here's why. I think, and I'll be very honest, I think if I would have come up against any violence,
Hmm.
I think I would have been more aware. But I also think this. When I came out, I was 24 years old. I did my master's. I went to teachers college. I got a job. I was terrified of people finding out. I'm also a teacher's a very different dynamic. I
Right.
got a job at a private school, heaven forbid, and I'm just like, I'm never telling them I'm gay.
Right.
Because in my head, I thought kids are going to call me a dyke. Kids are going
Mhm.
to, that's what's going to come out. That's how they're going to, when I give them a bad mark, like that's all of these things. By the way, it never has happened, like not even one time, but all of these things are the parents are going to have issues. So I'm never coming out. Well, that lasted my first year. And then when I finally like verbalized it, everybody's sitting around me going, okay, yeah, of course we knew that. That's not, who are you hiding? Now, my hair wasn't this short, and I didn't have tattoos when I
Mhm.
started teaching. So, but the funny part was, and again, I think this is the difference between women and men, gay women and gay men for the most part. And I know we're leaving out whole parts of the community. So, for the love
Oh,
of
yeah.
God,
No, yeah.
people don't come at me with, what about, I get it. But for me, I had short hair, but it was longer. Like it was still covering, it was longer. It was a little bit more kind of scruffy looking. And I, for years, Stu, had parents trying to set me up with their sons for years. And I think that straight people, especially when it comes to women who are just a little more masculine, because I know that right now I look masculine because I'm wearing the jersey and the hat. But
Yeah.
to be honest, unless I'm talking like I have a lot of feminine, I talk with my hands. I have a lot of feminine energy. People
Mhm.
just don't think I have it because of the way I dress and the way I cut my hair.
Mhm.
But back then, for at least, I don't, for a long time, even when I had a picture of my partner on my desk getting married,
Yeah.
they'd be like, my son just graduated med school. And I'm like, oh, that's sweet, but I'm taken. I wouldn't even say I
Yeah.
was gay. I'm just taken. Oh, that's too, if anything happens, you let us know. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But with men, you guys can't step out of that lane.
No.
You guys can't. And as soon as you do, society and the world, even if you're not gay, tries to slap you back so hard, right? You're an elementary teacher, gay. You're a hygienist, gay. You put
Mhm.
on a figure skate, gay. Like you guys really have a narrow lane.
Yes.
So I think that that's also, so I've never felt that, right? I joke with my a lot of the people on TikTok because they ask me what my favorite state is, and I constantly say Tennessee, and they laugh. They're like, "Really?" Like, listen, my mom loved Elvis. I went there every year. I went there as a little kid. I went there as a teen. I went there as an adult. I went there looking like the way I look, and I haven't been confronted with. Now, the funny part is, I usually hang out in more of the black dominated Memphis than
Yeah.
the white dominated Memphis. So
Mhm.
that might be a cause.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of people don't care about women as much, and a lot of people will just mistake me for a dude. If they're so tunnel visioned,
Right.
they just go, guy.
It's it's
Don't worry,
true.
he's a guy. He's a
Yeah.
guy. So what's the big deal? He's holding
Right.
a girl's hand because he's a guy.
Yeah.
So I think that I've kind of existed in that. Um, you know, and so yeah, I've again very, very lucky, but I think that luck also has to do with where I've grown up and the fact that I'm a woman.
Hmm.
We just don't face the same degree. I haven't faced. I know there's going to be some people on here. It's like, of course I've faced it. I haven't faced the same degree of verbal or physical violence because when I came out at work and all of a sudden I am who I am, I mean, and I've also been there for 20 years.
Right.
So I haven't stepped into another school. As I've gotten more vocal, as I've gotten stronger, as I've gotten, tattoos and I cut my hair shorter and more comfortable saying things like, my girlfriend or my wife or whatever the case may be, my school's kind of grown with me, and guess what, society's grown with me.
Right.
So I've been very lucky in that dynamic as well. Like I have a boss who he's still an old white dude,
Mhm.
Christian, and I'll have a boss who say, Joanna, why aren't you wearing, let me take you shopping, you can get a dress. I say, wait, I'll get that dress when you get something that matches.
Right.
And he laughs, we laugh.
Yeah.
And I'm also the person, some people would take that as such an insult and such a, and I'm like, you know what? But the only way Wayne, that person, that 75-year-old guy who has grown up with money and all of this and in this bubble, he doesn't get it. So by me existing with him for 20 years and by me pushing him every 5 seconds,
Hmm.
that's the only way he's going to get it. What am I going
Yeah.
to shut him down and quit my job? That doesn't make any sense to me,
No.
you
And that's
know?
something that I think it's such an important thing to just exist, but also to be able to have those conversations. I am a huge believer that it is not a minority's responsibility to educate, to take on the full burden of educating other
Sure.
people. But I do think that if people have done some work, that you have the responsibility to help them along with that, to
Hmm.
give them a perspective, to help them walk through these kind of like and tear down these walls they have, because I think when people can relate a cause to a person that they know, that it's easier
Totally
for them to
different.
contextualize it and to
Yeah.
understand the ramifications of these things. And I think that's the part that we lack sometimes, is because in these small rural places, I feel like we just chill over Wyoming, but like Wyoming is that there isn't,
Sorry, Wyoming, but
I
Laramie
know we
Project.
love
I don't know what
you.
to tell you.
Exactly.
Matthew Shepard's going to live in infamy there forever.
100%. But I think it's like having these people have access to someone that they know that is part of that of the LGBTQA community is rare, or that person doesn't feel safe enough to be as strong a voice as they
Hmm.
maybe need to have that impact. And I think
Hmm.
it's up to the rest of us who have the safety of a metropolis and thing to be that voice. Because people on the internet, it's interesting. People on the internet, and it's a weird thing for me that people think they know me, like are
Hmm.
friends with me, that we are as close as this kind of parasocial relationship gives them. But that gives me some power to be like, hey, you like me, you
Hmm.
see me on the internet, this affects me in a certain way. This is me living my authentic life in a wig. But it's like, I think we as content creators have that ability at least to give um, context and a sample for them to be like, that person, I know Joanna. I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
her. And it's
yeah,
like, because that was what I looked at. I looked at YouTubers, like OG YouTubers when they were coming out. I watched so many coming out stories before I came out. And it was amazing to me that I could reach out. And that's something that you didn't have. But I was
yeah,
able to go on the internet and be like, oh my God, there's so many people coming out. They're my age. Because you must have felt so alone in that process. Whereas I could look out and be like, oh, there's other
yeah.
people in the world.
I think yeah, I mean, absolutely. And to give people context, like when I graduated high school, the internet was barely a thing.
Hmm.
So forget phones and all of that kind of stuff. The internet was barely a thing. When I went to university my first year, I didn't want to get an email. I didn't see the point. Nobody's going to do this. That's quite my literally my thought. But the interesting part, and that's how I went to school because I didn't come out then, right? I didn't come out until I went to York University. And
Hmm.
here's the difference. I went to York University, everybody we went on strike. So it's interesting. I don't know if we didn't go on strike if this would have happened in the same way. And I was walking these picket lines with all these PhD candidates and master's candidates and professors, and we were this political struggle, right? And everybody kept saying partner. And I would go home every night going, everybody's gay. Everybody's gay that went there. And all of a sudden, I started just cracks would open, right? So I would talk to somebody. I met my first trans man in that process. I met him as like as a trans man. He already had
Hmm.
top surgery, but he was still married to his partner Brian, and they were from Nova Scotia, and they were still married. And Dan came to this, and I got to hear that story, and that story in whatever that was 2001. That was beyond anything I'd ever sort of come in contact with before, right? And then I met my first girlfriend, but then I was immersed in that, and I was immersed in a community in Toronto which I started playing rugby on a team with a whole bunch of gay girls. I started, like, I was immersed in these communities, which made me feel safe. So, and a little crazy. But I think if I didn't have that, I don't know. Like, if I just would have come to terms with it in Whitby on a Friday night, I don't know how that would have played out. You know what I
No,
mean?
exactly. It was funny that like the first trans man that and it's something that I don't even know this person in real life. It was someone that I followed on YouTube out of looking for coming out videos. This person had done a coming out video to their parents about being trans, and I followed their entire journey, and it was interesting because it felt like a breakup at the end of it all, because
Mm.
they said like this was my journey, this was it, it's over now, I'm now going to live
Yeah.
my life, there's nothing else I'm going to be able to give
Mhm.
you all. And they
Right.
ended it, and I was like, oh my, what am I gonna do? My
Yeah.
friend, like, uh, Jay is gone, but like, it was interesting to have that because in my life, I didn't have that access. And I think it's really interesting because I have friends now who grew up in very small rural areas of Ontario and Newfoundland and, and, different provinces. And they're like, you must have had the full spectrum in
Mhm.
Toronto. And I'm like, no,
Sure.
no, I
Absolutely not.
didn't.
Yeah. I
So
think
yeah.
also, like, it's so interesting because I think, I mean, we've gone through stages, right? We've gone through stages. What is and isn't okay. People have fights. Okay, you can be gay. Okay, you can be this, but you can't
Yeah.
be bi yet. Okay, now you can be bi. Okay, you can be
Right.
bi, but you can't be this. And now trans. It's the trans thing, right? But
Hmm.
I think at the heart of it, Stu, if I was a betting woman, it's always been the trans thing, but on a different level.
Right.
Your wig and my backwards baseball hat made people feel uncomfortable. I don't know if it was simply about who we slept with. I think
Hmm.
it was about the aesthetic that we challenged, and it doesn't make people feel, because the first binary we're taught, the very first piece of socialization, and it's not in malice, it's not in hate, it is, oh, it's a little girl, talk to her quietly, hold her close, put her
Yeah.
in pink, tell her she's beautiful. Oh, it's a little boy, hold him out here, jostle him around, tell him he's strong, he's going to be a great football player and break a lot of hearts. Like,
Yeah.
we that's it.
Yeah.
That's our ground zero. And I'm going to
Mhm.
argue it's ground zero in the majority of countries across religious bases, racial lines, ethnic lines. It's our ground zero. And I think the gay population, by virtue of my supposed masculinity, your supposed femininity,
Mhm.
challenge that.
Yeah.
It makes people on, they don't know how to deal, they don't know how to handle, they don't know how to put you in that box, and it's the first box we ever learned. And then the trans community, in the sense of wanting to be in a different body,
Hmm.
which I to me, when I say trans, people say, are you, a lot of people assume I'm trans, and I say I'm not, but I am, because if we're saying gender's a binary,
Hmm.
I'm going to say everybody is.
Right. Yeah.
Who lives in each body? There's no 100% masculine dudes, no 100% feminine women. So we're all trans. It's just a matter of degree at this
Yeah.
point. And women have been given purview to be a little bit more trans than everybody else. And then the trans community is getting more and more vocal about their identity and how they perceive and how what they want to be called and how that pronoun matters and all of those things. But it's interesting because at my school, I've had a few kids that are non-binary. We've had kids that are trans, and for the most part it's accepted. And but every once in a while you get some kid saying something stupid, and you get the older staff like Wayne saying, God, it was never like this, why is it like this now? And he kind of
Mm.
gets
Hmm.
anxious at all of this,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody has a say. I go, Wayne, here's the key, and I need you to hear me. I said, 15 years ago when I was at this school and we had gay kids, you didn't hear about it because even in this school, which I love to death, they
Hmm.
didn't feel safe enough to yell at the kid who used the F word. So
Hmm.
you think it didn't happen, but it happened constantly. But the kids didn't have the power to say anything. Now, those same kids and their allies don't stand for a minute of it. So you hear it about it 24/7, not because it
Exactly.
never happened before, but because now they have the power to tell people to shut up.
Yes.
And that's the only difference. And that's the difference. Florida, with every trans is so new. This is all, no, it's not. No,
No,
it's not. They just have the power. And that's why I see it as a positive in some ways. They right now have the power to say, screw you,
exactly.
and
A
the
hundred
platform,
percent.
you
A
know?
100%. And I think that is exactly what it is like when people say it to me, because I have people in my life and my work who say the same thing. It wasn't this difficult when we were growing up, or it wasn't this difficult back in these days. And they reference some obscure decade. And I'm
Mhm.
like, no, it was always there. But these people didn't have the comfortability or the freedom or the platform or the backing to be able to
Yep,
say, F you, I won't take this anymore. I deserve to
exactly.
have full um, license over my happiness, my freedom, and my life. Um, so it's something that I think I really, really love that is happening now. And I think it's an uphill battle, because I think a lot of people at the top are going to feel they need to push that back down because they're
100%. And that's what
uncomfortable
you're
with the
feeling.
conversation. Exactly.
That's what you're feeling.
Yeah.
It's all of a sudden so different. It's all of a sudden so much more. No, it's not. It's
Yeah.
not all of a sudden anything. That's the pushback. But I'm telling you right now that that's as painful and horrible and hard as it is to be a trans kid in Texas or to be a gay kid in Florida or anywhere in the United States right now. I have that feeling. And I hate, we're going to go back to your it gets better. I'm not going to say you're going to make it better. Right
Mhm.
now is right now is a big final push.
Right.
Right now is a moment. And the reason why they're pushing against women is because it's not against women, it's against femininity. And the reason why it's against femininity is because that's the way I get at gay men who are too feminine.
Right.
It's all intersected, right? It's all connected. Stu, we've been on here for an hour and 6 minutes.
Oh my God. I
But
enjoyed this.
I want to say, listen, are you down? We have to do a part two. I
Yes,
need
you
to,
do.
we're going to, because I don't know who's going to listen to me for 2 hours, but I'm going to close this session.
Okay.
We'll stick around. You'll do a part two. We'll do a
Yeah.
part
Let's do
two,
part two.
Buffy.
Yeah.
Holy
Oh,
Buffy.
yes. Yes. Only Buffy.
Okay, guys, coming up, part two, only Buffy. We're only talking about Buffy. So if you don't like Buffy, first of all,
So
go
much to
watch it
say.
and drop me as a fault. I don't know what you're going to do. Please go watch it. It's on Disney. If you don't, and you should like Disney right now, and go watch it. And then Stu and I are going to talk about all things Buffy coming up. Stu, you've been amazing. I'm going to put all of Stu's taglines right in the comment section. You can't see what I'm doing right now if you're just listening, but I'm going to put them all there so you can go check him out on TikTok and all of his platforms. Thank you so much, Stu.
I really enjoyed
Get
this.
comfortable. Go
I
get a
am.
coffee. And we'll see you guys same time next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat station. Thanks for hanging out. Dismissed.